Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and we are at the clutter zone. And as usual, it is cluttered. And as the title card said, we are working on the Stair car from Arrested Development. And we have two of the main components here. We've got the cab from the 79 F-150, and we've got the chassis from the 91 Ford Super Duty, the F-350. And to start with, we're just going to set this aside for now. What we want to do is we want to start working on the 350 chassis. Now, anything that runs between the front and the back, we're going to leave for now. We're not going to worry about that stuff. But I want to get the suspension in place. So that way I can put wheels on it, and I can have it as a rolling chassis, and I can therefore mount the cab on it and make sure everything is standing right. Because if you'll recall from part one, the wheelbase on this truck is going to be quite a bit longer than what we need. I think we might need to take a ½ inch, maybe a full inch out. I'm not sure yet. But that'd be a whole lot easier to figure out with the truck sitting on its wheels, the cab sitting in place where it should be, where it is happy, and then we can use the photos to judge how much space we have to remove from our rear axle to the cab. And I would imagine it's going to come out right about here. Now, yes, that's going to screw up the front of this fuel tank, but I'm not really that concerned about that. So, first thing we're going to do is work on the front and the rear suspensions. All of 4 parts later, we have our front twin I-beam suspension in place. The shocks and the springs are all one part, and I think they pretty much look the part. And then we've got the tie rod here. So I think it looks fairly convincing. And I know there's a difference between the 1980 on up to mid-90s front end and the earlier chassis. I'm sure there are some differences, but in terms of it being a Ford twin I-beam suspension, it's basically there, and it's what it should be. So I think it looks the part, and it's better than me trying to cobble together some cast resin parts. And I don't even really have any 70s parts to copy anyway. I've got the rear springs in place, and the more I'm looking at this secondary fuel tank, because of course here's the regular stock fuel tank and this is a second fuel tank, the more I'm looking at it, the more I'm thinking, you know what, before I go any farther, I think I'm going to get the Dremel and I'm going to hog that out, get that right out of the way. Because when I cut the overall chassis to the right length, I'm going to have to mess this up anyway. And I see no reason why an airport stair car would have an extra long-range fuel tank on it. So I think we're going to be getting rid of that sooner rather than later. A Dremel tool made short work of getting this extra fuel tank out of the frame. And I'm pretty sure that this section here is going to be removed, so I'm not too worried about this gap right there. Just do a little bit of cleaning up, and that'll make it a whole lot easier to shorten the frame and reinforce it later. Other than the basic chassis, I've made a decision to use as many of the 1978/79 parts. So I'm going to be using the engine from the AMT 78 pickup truck. So this is the engine I'm going to be assembling. And here are the parts. Here's our engine being built up, and I'm fairly happy with this engine. It's got a lot of nice detailing on it. It's got a lot of nice things molded in, like you can see here for the exhaust manifold. You can see here is where it would be bolted onto the cylinder head. The distributor cap is especially nice. Instead of just being a blob, you can actually see it has the posts for each of the wires would come out of. One thing I'm not happy about, though, is the actual air cleaner, the classic frying pan, is quite well molded. You can even see, the wing nut. That's what we want to say. The wing nut on top is quite well molded. Then you've got this little cutout here. Near as I can tell, that cutout is there so that it clears you can see it clears the distributor cap, which I suppose is fine, except on the real thing, an air cleaner is basically a sealed, low cylinder. You can't have a cutout like this, otherwise the air would be getting in there as opposed to here. So I think what I might end up doing is I might mount it slightly farther back on the engine and just cover this with a bit of plastic just so that it's not cut. Because you won't be able to tell if it's smooshed back just a wee bit so it sits on there better. So upon checking photos of real Ford engines, I did see that yes indeed there was a large dent in the side of the stock air cleaners to clear the distributor cap. So what I did is I put a piece of 10 thou styrene on here, and then when it was dry I heated it up and basically shoved it in to give the impression that it does have that pushed in dent for clearance, just like the real one does. And I think that's better than the half moon area that they carved out of the original part. While test fitting the pulley assembly to the front of the engine, you can see that the power steering pump, which is what I assume that is, and the alternator aren't actually attached to the engine. So I'm going to fabricate some brackets just to give them some structure to go to the engine, because that always looks a little bit better. In this shot you can hopefully see that I've added a bracket here to go to the back of the alternator, and on the other side I've added a bracket here to go to the power steering pump. Now there's a bit of a gap, and I'll glue that when I actually put the pulley assembly in place, but for now at least I've got something to glue to. So our engine is about 90% done. All the basic assembly and painting has been done. I used, what kind of blue did I use? It's not Ford engine blue, but it's blue. It's Grand Trunk Western Blue by Model Flex. I've had that bottle forever. I seem to like it for Ford blue. It's probably a little darker than it should be, but the exhaust manifolds have been painted rust. The pulleys have all been painted, and if the fan looks a little weird, it's one of these asymmetrical fans, which I think they do in order to cut down on wind noise or vibration, I don't know which. I did a lot of thinning down of the blades. Now, it still lacks spark plug wires, but I've already pre-drilled all the holes in the top of the distributor cap and where the spark plugs would go, so they still need to be installed, and the whole thing is just going to be given a liberal coat of black gooey wash, because I mean this truck is over 25 years old. Now I mentioned in part 1 that these are the wheels we're going to use because they're dished wheels, but these are highly chromed, and of course the Stair car just had painted steel wheels, so I'm going to be stripping the chrome off these. It'll make painting them just that much easier. There's all kinds of different chemicals and things you can use. I'm just going to use some oven cleaner. I've had good results with that in the past. So, but whatever you choose to use is up to you. But generally I've found that the oven cleaner works pretty good. Now to get our chrome off of our wheels, I'm just going to use some oven cleaner. Now this says fume free, but you know what? I'm going to do it in my spray booth anyway, just to carry any dangerous fumes away. I figure it's better than just doing it on the workbench. Now it's only been about, maybe 15 minutes. You can see the most of the chrome has been eaten off of this. So I'm just going to give this a rinse of water, just to clear off the oven cleaner. Here is our wheels with the chrome removed. There's still a little bit on the back sides, but the areas that I have to paint, they're fully dechromed. And there was no damage done to the plastic. The Super Duty frame comes with these wheel hubs that snap over the stub axles, which I've never really been thrilled with. The back ones actually went on pretty good, or I spoke too soon. This one has actually popped off again. The fronts did not stay on at all. I had to glue those on, which isn't a big deal because I'm not planning on racing this around the tabletop. And this is all I'm going to worry about wheel-wise for now. The main thing I wanted to do was to get some wheels or some round things on here so I could figure out, is my cab sitting in the right place and how much has to be chopped off to shorten the frame. So that's where we are with that. This is the interior bucket for the 78 Ford, and I haven't done any painting on it. And if you're looking at it and shrieking internally, "You've glued it together!" Yes, I have. But I've just glued the instrument panel on with white glue, and that'll be easy to snap out without doing any damage. But that's in there for the express reason of I want to see how it's going to fit inside the body, and I want it to just be able to sit in place so I can set this on the frame and see, am I going to have to do any shims or come up with some body mounts or anything like that. But the main concern right now is having it sit on the frame so we can shorten the frame. In this shot, you can see that I've added a little line in here, a little, basically, strip of L-shaped plastic. You can see it there too. And the reason for that is I want a really positive stop there for the interior to go up in, because we're going to be doing a lot of in, out, and fitting and everything like that, and we don't want to think we've got it in place and we don't. Next step is I'm going to white glue the interior in place, and then that way it will stay where I want it to while I test fit it on the chassis, and then I can always bust it loose easily in order to finish the model. So I've got some mocking up done here. The interior of the cab, or basically the bucket, has been glued into the cab with white glue. That way I'm not trying to hold it in place while I'm trying to do everything else. So, as you can see, this is about as far forward as I can shove the AMT cab on the Revell chassis, and it's not quite far enough forward. And the reason it can't go any farther forward is because of these two pieces right here. So I'm going to cut those out and see if we can improve the fit. Okay, we're getting closer. The only thing is it doesn't seem to want to sit down in the front quite as much as it should. And I think the solution will be to file an angle here and here. And that should let the AMT body sit farther down on the chassis, down to where we need it. All right. I think we're in the ballpark. We're going to need to put a mounting pad at the back of the cab. But I think the front of the cab is coming down basically where it needs to be. So I'm just going to quickly put a mounting pad in there so that we can figure out how much we have to take out of this chassis. We're continuing to work on mocking things up. The outer wheels have been glued onto the wheel hubs, once again just with white glue, because I'm not ready to have those on there permanently. Now the rear wheels, I've just simply got the tires sitting on the inner hub, And if we look, you can see that we've now got a transverse beam going across here. And then I've put another piece of styrene on top. And that's basically to level the back of the cab. And I'll put the cab on so you can see. Now I've got the cab sitting on the frame, and you can see that the back of the cab sits on that transverse beam. And as I mentioned earlier, the bucket has also been glued into the cab just with white glue. That way it's easy to pop it out. And I can mock the chassis up and everything without having to worry about whether I've got the interior done or anything like that. So it does look a lot more gangly than it should in terms of length. And I'll give you a side view here in a second with the wheels on. So there's our side view. You can see the cab is still just a bit low at the back. We want it sitting level. And I don't think we can really shove the front end down much more. Even if I give it a gentle push, it's still a little low at the back. And as well, you can see that we're going to have to remove at least ½ an inch from the frame, if not a full inch. Here we can see I've got the engine just sitting in the frame, just to make sure there's not going to be any serious issues. And I don't foresee any. Probably what I'm going to do is, you can see there are these bosses right here, and they're probably for mounting the more modern engine. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build these out just a bit so that I've got something to cradle the older 1978 engine. I don't think there's going to be a big problem with that. The only thing I see right now is possibly the engine will have to go in after the cab is mounted. I've added another strip of styrene to that mounting pad at the back of the cab, and I really think we've got it. I think this is going to be the way we're going to hold this together. And if I move over here, you can see basically the I-beam and the 2 strips of styrene. And that looks like that's going to hold that on there really good. In this shot, I've got the engine once again just sitting inside the frame, inside the engine bay, and it looks like there's not going to be any issues. Although I have to say, the 78 engine bay as AMT has modeled it certainly looks awfully plain. I think we're probably going to have to do something to busy that up a bit. So it's Tuesday morning, and I was originally hoping I was going to have this episode all edited and packaged up sometime on Sunday and post it Sunday evening. So I'm a little bit behind what I had planned. I think I have enough material for one episode and a decent update. So I think I'm going to leave deciding how much I'm going to cut out of the frame until next episode. I don't really want to rush that decision. So I hope this satisfies everybody's curiosity about the Stair car and a progress report. And I think it's coming along well. I'm really happy with the way the cab is sitting on the frame. I'm really happy with the way that the frame's going together. So until next time, thanks for watching, and just keep on modeling.